I'm going to show a few slides of supernovae in binary C. So I did my master thesis project on pair stability supernovae, and I guess that's the reason why Rob asked me to go over this. So yeah, I'll say a few words about the relevant processes and how that's implemented in binary C, and then talk about a couple of recent uses of binary C in supernova studies. Okay, so we're talking about massive stars here. Massive stars, for supernova fields means higher than 8 solar mass, because these stars go core collapse supernovae. Core collapse supernovae and even way more massive stars go pair instability or pulsational pair instability supernovae. But this is only for stars that are initially like above 60 solar mass at low mentalities. These supernovae produce yields, chemical yields. I'm going to say very shortly something about that. One very important process in these supernovae are kicks. One of these is called the Blau kick, and that's actually just the orbital readjustment of the mass loss due to the supernova. So even if the supernova is a symmetric supernova and there's no momentum really, then still the orbit changes a lot. And if this happens and more than half of the total mass of the system is ejected, then this binary is unbound. But in other cases, there's also a supernova kick due to asymmetric supernova ejection or due to a neutrino momentum. And what's nowadays quite hip is looking at the compact remnants of these supernovae, neutron stars and black holes, and studying the gravitational wave progenitors, which stars end up in gravitational wave mergers. And gravitational wave recall kick, I won't really say anything about this. Okay, so in binary C, this is implemented in the supernova directory. It speaks for itself quite clearly, and most of the code is in supernova.c and new supernova. And in sm.h, there's a lot of definitions for supernova types. So if you think of some new specific supernova type, then that would be the place to define a couple of things in. There's kick options, orbit options, etc. are defined in there. And a supernova is invoked during the evolution part of binary C in these following files, and due to mergers of stars. And then if a supernova happens, a supernova event type is created, and this event is added to the event handler that Rob spoke about to very nicely allocate all the memory and handle the real physics behind this. This is a very nice improvement in the code. It puts all the things in a nice place, so to say. So very, very short in general, these events, they contain instruction for physics, but also handle all the coding things, allocation of memory and freeing of memory. And in the general case, you have an add event, you give the star data or the world data, type of supernova, and then the event handler function, and that's really the function in which you define the routine that really does all the physics. And then the erase event handler that sort of stops everything and releases all memory, some data, and whether it's a unique event. This gets added to a stack of events, and then this gets handled each time step if there are events. And some other examples of events are novae, common envelope, Roche slope overflow start, but I saw that it wasn't implemented yet. Contact binary, unstable Roche slope overflow. And these are all in the event macros. Okay, so what happens in a supernova event in binary C? There's a couple of things that happen. The remnant mass gets set. So this star evolves. You calculate the mass that this remnant would have, and from this also the ejected mass from this supernova. There are logging routines that give all the information that you want. You can enable these.
How do you determine the remnant mass?
So there's different formulas for this, but I'll come to this. And then there are routines to execute the kick and calculate a new orbit. And there's the yields if you have the nucleosynthesis enabled. Okay, so the random mass is a good question. How are these calculated? Well, there's a set of functions in neutron star binary black hole mass.c, and based on the prescription or like the choice that you put in, you can do this as a command line argument. You can choose which prescription you use for this. And apart from the maximum neutron star mass, there's the black hole prescription, in which you can choose the old Hurley routines for this, the more recent Spera, the Fryer, the rapid and delayed supernova mass determination, and the Fryer is sort of the the field standard. This is the thing that people use most. And then there's a set of parastability prescriptions that are not yet implemented, but will be done so very soon. Oh yeah, there's a logging of supernova that you can enable with the log supernovae. These are located in the logging directory.
Does that code still work?
I think so, yeah. There's two, log SN and log supernovae.
I'm trying to remember which is which.
Yeah, no, so, yeah, it might be the other one, but there's at least two and one of these works. Okay, there's a sort of a preset or like a template for the logging of supernova and all the information that you want. But you can also log this information in log every time step, and you just ask in that loop. You ask like, okay, does any of this two stars just undergo a supernova? And if so, you log all the information that you want, the previous state and the current state, and the mass that's ejected, etc. And then it's up to you what you want to log. If you put a flag in there, then you can automatically capture that event and stop the whole simulation. Okay. So what I told, there's a big part of supernova is the kicks. These are contained in the supernova kick and the Monte Carlo kick.c files. So what it does, it sets up the binary orbit, calculates the kick velocity, and from this calculates a new orbit, new orbital energy, new eccentricity, new separation, and then it outputs some logging. And as I told, you have the Blau kick, which is due to mass loss of the system, and even if it's a spherically symmetric ejection, there's still a kick induced in this system. But there's reason to believe that a lot of supernovae are actually ejecting asymmetrically, at least momentum. And well, the literature hints towards a Maxwellian distribution, velocity distribution, and that's the current one. That's the mainly used prescription for this. You can also go for a fixed velocity kick or any custom routine that you want. There, you might want to use a double Maxwellian, or literature is not fully clear about what black hole might have for kicks. So yeah, and as I said, these kicks can lead to a very significant different orbit, either a disruption of this this binary or a very eccentric orbit. And one of the things that is also important in some situations, the supernova is not energetic enough to eject all of the material, so there is some material that falls back onto the protoneutron star. And how it's done now is that the kick is scaled with this fallback, so effectively the momentum kick is lower, and so yeah, 1 minus the fallback fraction. So if there's a full fallback, it's actually a failed supernova and there's no real ejection of matter, then there is also no kick. No Blau kick and no.
While you're on kicks, you can also choose the direction.
Yes, you
so
can.
It's normally random, but
yeah.
You can also say, I want it towards the other star, away from the other star, up or down. That is possible.
Yeah, so if you really
want to do that, I don't know. But
well, if you really want to study what the direction of the kick might have for an influence, if it's along the velocity or anti-parallel or perpendicular to it, towards the other star, in which cases for a given system would this lead to the disruption?
No idea whether that's physics.
How is the orbital phase chosen if it's eccentric?
Sorry, what?
How is the orbital phase chosen?
Very good question.
Choose a random.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we don't really resolve the orbit itself.
Choose a random number between 0 and 2 pi, and that's your mean anomaly.
Yes, yeah. So that gets calculated. That's true. But afterwards, we just calculate the eccentricity, but we don't set up the real orbit.
The fallback, which objects experience fallback, or
So if you have
where's that come from?
lower mass, around 8 till I will show a plot in a bit, but lower massive stars, massive stars, they eject most of, like, all of their matter, and there is an intermediate range in which there is a fallback of between 1 and 0, and from a certain point, I think like 30 solar masses, maybe 40 solar masses, but we'll see a plot in this. There's a full fallback, so nothing really gets ejected, at least according to the prescriptions that we have implemented prior to 2012. They calculated the ejection of this. Oh yeah, so yeah, here's the plot. So this is a very big range of stars, and I made this plot for my master thesis. The most important part is the middle pane, in which I show you the fallback fraction. That's the red dots. Here you see between more or less 25 till 45, there is a fallback, which is not 1, and everything above this for
So
this given.
Nothing above 40 solar masses explodes.
Not in the conventional sense of exploding. No, they turn into a black hole. Whether
that's correct.
Okay.
Description.
Okay, that could very well be
yeah.
indeed. But this is a prescription of Fryer that we use for this. Whether this is really physically correct would be interesting.
Whether a star explodes or not is probably related to this
compactness phase.
Compactness parameter that is a non-monotonic function of Sam's mass.
Yeah.
So that certainly looks weird. If you look,
believe that?
Sorry?
That's from models.
But also observations, right? So observationally, we don't. Most of the supernova we see in terms of projected mass or progenitor mass seem to be below, let's say, 20 solar masses. However, there are specific instances of stars where you have. I can show you something where there's 25 solar masses helium core and half a solar mass of nickel. So that must have been a 40, 50 solar mass star.
Sure, yeah.
But there's not so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And, even accounting for the IMF, there are not so many of them. So
sure.
Yeah. There's probably better prescription you can use in there. I can send you a link to.
Yeah. So I have not really looked into the compactness. I know Mathieu and Manos probably know a lot more about this. This initially might have been part of my master thesis, but we decided not to do this.
But I mean, this will seriously affect the chemistry, right? I mean, there's not many of these massive stars.
Oh, that's very true. Yeah.
If they're
well,
for oxygen abundance is right.
Most of the supernovae are under 20 solar masses, won't they, Dominic?
They will, but I mean, if you're looking at something, I mean, that produces like something that's 20 solar masses could produce, 1 or 2 solar masses of oxygen. So you don't need many of them.
The IMF also kills you.
It does, but and again, there's a paper by Woosley and Brown where they looked at this, but it's.
And it also depends where they cut it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
No.
Okay, so yeah, this prescription mostly depends on the helium core, the CO core mass. I'm not sure how this is interesting. Okay.
Can I ask a question? Maybe that's the correct time to go. It's a little bit about the criterion for having a supernova, because now you already just mentioned like the CO core or the helium core, and these are not. I mean, these are not exactly the same thing, and they are not. I'm not sure how well they are defined in binary C or in VSC, starting already from there. So from what I remember from when I was doing the calculations in the PhD, pretty much we needed to define something like a CO core, which was the core of a naked helium, when we had a naked helium star.
Mm-hmm.
Or a fraction of the core when we had a hydrogen-rich star, because the core in a hydrogen-rich star, it's the helium core, and we need the fraction of that one.
Okay.
So my main question would be, how much should we believe on the exact value of that one? Is this the main thing that we are testing when we want to see if something makes a supernova or not? Because especially when we're talking about binaries, we can end up with weird mass accretion, weird mergers that it's not easy to know 100%, like to say, okay, yeah, this will explode for sure or not. I'm talking about core collapse.
Yeah. As far as I know, these Fry prescriptions have been done for a single star, right? And without previous merging history or mass accretion. And they just tested this with the helium core exploding. And we calculated what binaries he would give. I think we used even your prescription for this, Manos.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
So my main question goes, for example, if we have a helium star, so stellar type of 7, 8, 9 for people that have already been using binary C, and we start stripping it.
Yeah.
So we have something that we start stripping it. We cannot know, should we trust of how much there is a helium-rich envelope left on top, and which part of it is a CO or on top? Because there were cases, maybe they are not very important from a population synthesis point of view, so from an ensemble point of view.
Sure.
But there may be cases, if we want to go to specific channels, that we are stripping a star, and binary C wants to say that, okay, the core, I will adjust the core accordingly inside, without being so much able to keep in track that what you're stripping right now is helium. Yeah. And your CO core is there yet. I don't know if Rob also has a feeling on that one or not.
Yeah, so there are 3 phases of helium evolution, the way the code is written at the moment. You have the helium main sequence, and then you have helium shell burning, which has a Hertzsprung gap, a giant-like phase. No core is defined in the main sequence, much like for normal main sequence stars, but once you have shell burning, you can well define a core. And so we do follow the carbon core below that shell. So you do know what that is.
And even if mass is stripped, it will remain the same mass?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I think that's an answer to the question then.
Want to know whether you have a supernova or not, you compare to the minimum helium star mass for carbon ignition. That's possibly not ideal, because the way it works in the code at the moment is based on Onno's old models, where they just compare the initial mass in the helium star phase. Let's say if the mass is initially above something, you have ignition. Below something, you don't. You should probably use the core mass, not that. But that's a bit more complicated. That's something that could certainly be improved. Whether it'll make much difference, I'm not sure. Maybe not. So that's certainly something that could be certainly improved. And then you look to see whether you're massive enough for neon ignition. And if you are, then you explode as, I guess, if it's less than neon ignition, you have electron capture. If it's above neon ignition, you have a 1BC. So most of the time, they're massive enough to ignite the neon. So we do have core masses. Whether you trust them or not, that depends how you define trust. Don't know the answer to that. What I'm waiting for is for us to finish Geo's grid probably sometime in next year, where we should be able to replace these models, and then we can certainly tell you whether we trust them or not, because we'll actually have models to do it. That's one of the reasons we think constructing our own grids is extremely useful, because we can do these kind of tests very easily.
So yeah, and for sure, if there are some grids, and to go again back to the explodability windows and the compactness, someone could put the like adjust the prescription from work like Sucbolt, where they have compactness per mzams as a function of zams.
Yes.
Which in reality is as a function of helium core or CO core. That's where my question was coming from. And then say, okay, this explodes, this not, depending on the although these are for single stars, but that's the best we have right now.
Yeah, so I was thinking if you're going to do it in binaries, then the ZAMS mass is not so useful, but it's...
No, the ZAMS for sure, but the core mass, maybe it's the best approximation.
That's good. That's much better for all of this.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. Sounds like a good plan.
But we need the grids first before we can do this.
We'll put it on the to-do list for after that.
It's on there.
Okay, I will continue with the rest of the slides. Okay, so supernova kicks, as I told, it's an important thing, and the option for this that you can. Okay, well, so as Rob explained, there is a supernova kick option for all types of supernovae. As you can see here, there's supernova kick distribution and then supernova type, whatever you want to put in there, and you have options for which type you want to use, either Maxwellian, fixed, which might be a zero kick or whatever, or a custom double Maxwellian, for example. And then the second option per supernova type is the kick dispersion that you can put in. And there's options for the orbit calculation. One is for the original BSC, and the other is Takens. I think the big difference between these two are that in Taurus and Takens also the impact on the companion is taken into account. That there's even an extra kick on the companion. It's a very it's a big paper, lots of mathematics.
Yeah, so beware if you want to look at the mathematics from that paper, it's hell. It could be done much more simply. I tried to get a student to do it last year, but I think I'll end up doing it myself. But
we can continue from where you started.
It can be done much more simply. And even Thomas's new papers are hideous in terms of mathematics.
Okay.
I'm not one of his school kids. So.
Okay, well.
But the kick on the companion is only relevant in very close line.
Yeah.
So most stars it's totally irrelevant.
Yeah. So the default one is still 0, right? The BSC algorithm.
Yeah, but it's waiting for us to update it with some new code.
Okay.
We should talk about that.
Yeah. So that's that might be a nice project. Okay, and then there's the evolutionary splitting that Rob also talked about. So the thing is with kick, that's actually the only big thing that's a real random guess or random pick. And what you can do is you can split the evolution of this binary system to sample more kicks, starting from the same supernova. You can just sample 10 kicks in different directions and then see where the evolution afterwards ends up. You can do that 2 times. You give like a tree and you have 100 different options or 100 different outcomes for one initial system. And the probability of this initial system gets divided by the amount of splits that you have. And it just saves computation time because you don't have to start from the beginning. And you can very easily explore the impact of different kick directions. The options Rob already spoke about. Okay, then there's the supernova yields. This is not really, I'm not really super familiar with this, but this is in the nucleosynthesis. So you have to enable these flags and also the supernova nucleosynthesis. These are all in the nucleosynthesis supernova yields.c. And these are indeed called calculated differently for different supernova types. And there's a lot of papers, a lot of tables for this. But for core collapse, this is this file. Peristability, there's peristability is not. We don't have any data implemented in this yet. And for kilonova instead of hypernovae, this is on the to-do list if we can find some trustworthy yield.
While we're on this subject, the latest yields we have in there are the Chieffi-Lemongi yields from 2004. Now, I like those because you can choose the mass cut, which is great because most yield tables don't give you that. And Sandro Chieffi was very nice and he gave us all the data that they come up with. Do we need to update those with newer yields? I mean, is it worth it? That's my question. They're 1D piston models, but
if you want a large grid covering a whole bunch of masses.
I mean, that's what they do, which is
Yeah.
why it was good. But
Probably they're fine.
okay, I'll just leave them as they are.
I can ask somebody who will be able to give a better answer than that.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, for perishability, these explosions do not occur that often in a population, and kilonovae also not that much. So we've got most of the things covered in here now. Okay, so so then the recent some recent work that has been done with binary C and by people that are also here in virtually here. This is a paper by Manos. Studying the effect of binary interactions on supernova type 2, and he showed that a third or half of all the supernova type 2 progenitors have exchanged mass with a companion, and that's why binary C is very useful. It's very fast. You can explore very large parameter spaces and then just make these conclusions. And also a lot of mergers are involved in these progenitors. And this is a very nice plot, which very clearly shows so the influence of binaries, binary interactions in this. Then there was a paper by Mathieu also from this year, where he studied the velocities of disrupted stars after a core collapse supernova. And he did this by comparing natal kick prescriptions, the thing I talked about, and velocity dispersions. And he also used the evolutionary splitting to sample a lot of these kicks. And one of the key plots of this work is the following plot, that actually a lot of the systems are walkaway systems. These are they don't go that fast, they don't have high velocity, and only a small fraction of these are real runaway stars. Then last summer I worked with a summer student here looking at neutron star black hole kicks and the black hole retention in globular clusters, or clusters in general, and also comparing different kick prescriptions. Now, I gotta say, I didn't use binary C for this, but I used the formula that binary C also uses. That's because I didn't want to go through learning how does binary C work with the summer student that wasn't here for that long. We also had to learn how the n-body code worked. What we did here is we calculated the escape probability of a black hole by just sampling a lot of kicks and seeing, in which cases does a 40 solar mass black hole escape a cluster which has an escape velocity of 20 kilometers per second. This is very interesting work. However, this took into account only single stars. So if you have binary stars, this gets a little bit different. And we compared different kick models. The neutrino-driven kick is the one where there's that's set on neutrino velocities, measured pulsars, and then everything gets scaled down according to the mass of the black hole. So it's like a momentum conserving kick. The hybrid model is a combination of the fallback controlled kick, which I already explained, and this thing. And you see the hybrid model is suppressed very easily. So it's not really yet clear what kind of kicks black hole get, but studies like this can give insight in that. If you see a cluster with a lot of black holes in it, then you can make a conclusion about how these kicks work, for example. And something else that I did myself is my master thesis work. I simulated the impact of pulsational pair instability on the population of merging black holes, black hole binaries, and then comparing different algorithms. And this is one of the plots that I made. This is also for single stars. This is how the black hole remnant mass differs with having different pair instability prescriptions in there. So the purple line, what you see here, is if we would not have implemented any pair instability, and then you would see that for 0.1 solar mass, it will go to here, which is kind of high. But this is for 300 solar mass.
Doesn't that agree exactly with the star that was just discovered?
Maybe, but we don't know the progenitor mass. But this is very sensitive to the winds before, as already discussed. But this is more to show what the impact of using a variability routine has. So from about 160 solar mass for 0.1 solar metallicity, you see that all these stars totally disrupt and they leave nothing or no remnant behind. And in between there's a range in where these stars they pulsate, they shed a couple of times their outer layers, and then undergo a core collapse supernovae, and that adds up to black holes formed of more or less 45 solar mass. I have not yet had the time to implement the new work of Rob Farmer and Matteo Renzo on this, but I will very soon do so. The impact that this variability has, at least for this metallicity, is not that big. The only real influence you see is on the remnant masses of these black holes, obviously, because they cannot get higher than 45 solar masses for this routine at least. But the rate is not very much lower, which is not that weird because this only happens for very high mass stars. Yeah, okay. So yeah, that was the current recent use cases. So one of the caveats that is apparent in this is, so all these models are based on the work of Pols, the stellar evolution, which is a very wide range of metallicities, but not going to very high mass stars, so 50 solar mass. And as you saw, I simulated things with an initial mass of 300 solar mass already, which is well, a huge extrapolation of what it's being calibrated to. But you know, hopefully in the near future we have a new set of grids with a bigger mass range. I also will implement new prescriptions, and well, we'll see where we can find these variability yields. Kilonova, they should be again if we find.
Why not hypernova?
Because I made the mistake in hypernova.
No, but hypernova, you're a thing. So
Yes. Well, yeah.
I remember going to Chiaki's talks about hypernovae, and she was talking about the zinc and stuff like that. I have no idea what it was all about, really, but
Broad line 1Cs.
they just look like normal supernovae that are slightly brighter.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't miss much.
Yeah. No. So, and then we can also implement some extra kick distributions, the one that I did with my master students, for example. And there's a lot more things to do, which we discussed already during this talk. And yeah, that's what I wanted to tell.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have questions? We must have. Joe's nodding like he has lots of questions.
No, I'm nodding like they must have questions.
Oh, I see. I misunderstood. Any more questions from the experts online? Because they're very quiet.
Would it be okay to show one plot?
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Manos.
Yeah.
Yeah, gladly.
Let me. Someone has to stop sharing so I can share.
Okay, I will stop sharing my screen then.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Can you see this?
Yep.
Yeah. So the main thing that I was saying, going a little bit back to the point that I was mentioning before.
What is that font?
Yeah. I don't know. This is from a student here in Geneva.
It's amazing.
It's a nice one, right? This is from data from binary C, and this is the pre-supernova mass for the for the two types of supernova. Like type 2, both are core collapse supernova. So type 2 supernova, hydrogen-rich ones, type 1 supernova, and the addition of both of them here. So most of them are finishing with a pre-supernova mass around this value. And now there are these peaks here that I was a little bit, this I don't fully understand. We're talking about something exploding as a type 2, so having hydrogen on top with quite low values going up to even 1.4 solar masses. And that was the one that raised. By rate, again, it's not something very big, but if someone for some reason goes, like if we're talking about all core collapse supernova, you can even say, like put a limit the way they do it, for example, in Hendriks, and they say, okay, everything below this value, I don't believe it, I throw it away. But if someone wants to do specific channels, maybe they will be dominated with that one, and they have to be careful. Now,
There are ways to do that. I mean, you could have, for example, a common envelope with an AGB star and a CO white dwarf, and then those two could merge, form a core that is in excess of the Chandrasekhar mass, and then it assumes it explodes.
So that's one case of like a weird binary channel. The other case would be that there were a few systems that were just in the brink of the threshold between a white dwarf and a core collapse. So in initial mass, they would have been, I have it here pretty much. No, sorry. In initial mass, they would have been here. Sorry, let me show what's the best maybe for you. Okay, this is core mass at that moment, just before explosion. So that's the one. These are pretty much single stars we're talking here. These are pretty much the ones that are in the brink between the threshold between white dwarf and core collapse. So at 7-8 solar masses, this would be something like electron capture supernova, which are in the brink of becoming an AGB star and then a degenerate white dwarf. And then at that point, they reach the threshold for explosion after having lost most of their envelope on top of that. So what I'm saying is that if people want to focus on supernova, maybe they can check even a little bit more, and I can help on that one to be even more strict on what we are 100% sure to believe or what we want to study a little bit more to understand if we believe this or if we throw it away. Again, from a population synthesis perspective, maybe this is not an important thing, so you may take it out. But if someone cares about electron capture supernova, for example, this threshold is very important.
So that's something I think when we get to making the new gridded models, we're on the AGB. That's something I think we should do more carefully, because the way it was done in BSE is kind of rough. They look at the total mass at the beginning of the phase when they become a helium star or something like that, or you look at the core mass and then you have a certain mass you set to where you say now it ignites carbon, and below that it doesn't. It may not be that simple. But the good thing about Maser is that it can do all those phases of burning. So we should be relatively straightforward, be able to say whether it ignites carbon or ignites neon. I mean, if it ignites neon, you'd expect it to go. Is that fair to say? If it ignites neon, it'll form an iron core?
So I thought so I don't work so much on the modeling of these systems, but from what I understand, you're very sensitive to the details of mixing. So I've heard talks by Caroline Doherty, who does this sort of thing, and she says, there's probably a small range where you get electron capture supernovae, but is it kind of a 0.1 solar mass range or a 0.5 solar mass range, and is it from 7 to whatever or 7.5 to whatever? Is you can tweak things by plausible amounts and change that completely.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's kind of a problem. I'm sure you can pick something, but whether that's true or not is a different matter. And observationally, it's not clear whether we have observed an electron capture supernova or not. There are certainly things that are consistent with electron capture supernovae, but hydrogen rich, very low ejected nickel mass, low energy explosions. But yeah, I would say it's not entirely certain.
Any thoughts from stellar model and so on?
About the neon iron
Or about
thing.
whether we can say easily whether things ignite or not? I suppose we can. I think it's made that should be okay.
Well, message starts, I guess, for a given temperature and pressure, something like that. But I don't know if that's like the, that sounds like the physical criterion. I don't know any other.
Yeah, the problem is, well, it is, but I mean, the problem is that some of these things will ignite off center as well, so we can't just look at the central temperature and pressure.
Oh, well, I guess you can monitor the temperature and pressure in the whole.
But I think we can certainly do it once we've got our gridded models much more easily than we did with BSE. And we can change the mixing
Yeah, you can see
and see what the effect is.
how sensitive you are to. I think it changes quite a bit with metallicity as well.
If the electron captures, it will. I think, isn't it because it affects the second dredge up and stuff like that?
Yeah,
Which is the mess.
it's
So
it's
it's in that range, that mass range.
some range where you don't want to go there. You just
Well, that's why all the early papers by Worsley and Weaver sort of went up to about 6 or something,
Yeah.
had a gap, and then started again at 12, and they just interpolated. So cheating a little bit. It's a bit of a mess. Super.
Pretty much what I want to say is for people who want to do the core collapse, they should be careful on the criterion or set on that one, both for the threshold of very close to the white dwarf regime, and also again to the threshold of very high masses where we're talking about naked helium star.
Yeah.
But I just checked on that one again. I was not 100% sure. I can, if I have like half a minute.
Sure. Please go.
Walter has to go because he has a dinner, and he says that's better than talking to all of us. So I hope.
I saw paper here, but I just wanted to say quickly that you see the same thing. You see the paper?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that they are. This is what they have for the naked helium star in BSc. Pretty much. That's half a page, and they have a paragraph for the final stage of that one. Pretty much by replacing the mass that is in the criterion. The criterion is this one for a core collapse supernova, and they replace it with a helium core. So when you strip it, you change also a little bit the criterion for a core collapse.